Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for your strength, your powerful message. It's definitely resonating with many of us. And I just want to pass along a message to you from someone who shared her actual thoughts. Tracy, you are a survivor. I would like to commend you for being strong amidst the adversities that you've gone through. Thank you for sharing your plight. And she states, God bless you. So thank you very much. I'd like to invite,
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to invite our two other speakers to turn their mics on, to turn their videos on, and just take a nice deep breath, because that was powerful. Yeah, that was real. Exactly. Thank you for being vulnerable with me too, because I'm in the same boat. With that said, the title for this session has been resilience. Jan, you actually had a definition of resilience. I'm going to choose a very Webster dictionary-like definition. And resilience is the capacity to handle, they say quickly, but I'm going to take the word quickly out because I'd like to handle difficulties, to have grit, toughness. So Tracy, I've seen resilience and I've heard you speak before and I've seen the actions you've done as an advocate. I'd like to start with you and I'd like to open this up to the group. What does resilience mean to you and how has that impacted your life?
I think resilience, I had to see it as a day-by-day thing. It was getting up, it was getting my socks on, it was taking the extra steps that I needed. When I was out searching for a doctor, it was an incredibly heavy burden, but I leaned on humor and my family and striving for something better. I think it's something that a lot of chronic pain patients have, and I think it's something that could be improved upon with external support. I think sometimes when we get a little war weary, that resilience wears down a little bit, but I found that with just a little bit of support, it can come back.
Wow, thank you. I'm going to go in the reverse of alphabetical order. I'm curious, Sheila, if I can pose the same question to you, both professionally and personally, what does resilience mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a big question. I'm left with just that sense, Tracy, that you were saying at the very end, it shouldn't hurt this much to be getting care and getting support. And I just want to start there, that I think resilience can also come from meeting someone that is in your corner, someone that is able to look back to you and to say, I'm here, I'm going to stay. And so that meeting in terms of connection with another, that can sometimes be the beginning of being able to trust a little bit, right? Like down the guard a little bit to go inside and say, okay, where do I have some strength, or what might help me get through this today? So I think that therapeutic relationship, it's not, resilience isn't something we can do all alone sometimes, I feel. And I think that we need to be able to honestly lean on and find support from others. And actually in leaning and finding support with others, that can actually help us to feel safe enough to go inside ourselves and maybe find where there's a little bit more of that oomph or glimmer of hope or humor or whatever it is that drives us.
Thank you. Jan?
Yeah, well, you heard me talk a lot about that. I think personally, excuse me, personally, resilience has really been for me the ability to be flexible in terms of where I see my life journey unfolding. If you told me 30 years ago I'd be sitting here talking about this, I would have thought you're a little bit off your rocker. But life circumstances, after my experience in my meditation retreat and becoming so extremely ill so quickly, then it was, get back to Canada, try to figure out what was happening. get over, the first thing you do when somebody tells you have rheumatoid arthritis is search rheumatoid arthritis, and you see pictures of crippled people and there's horrible projections, and was to really find ways to leverage the spiritual practices that I knew that I was engaged with to be able to not let myself get into that place of catastrophizing, and being able to just say, okay, instead of asking, why is this happening to me, say, okay, what should I do with this? What can I do with this? And that's really that experience of suffering and pain and exploration, and it was what led me into my current career, to say, okay, I have pain and suffering. I was in a hospital and I passed by this spiritual care sign and I decided, oh, that looks interesting. I wonder what those people do. And here I am. Professionally, it's about being willing to acknowledge that my humanity and your humanity are not different. And I think that's what, when Tracy talked about her experience, it's like people think you are this kind of person and I am this kind of person and we are different. And that's where all of those judgments and things come from. For me, we can't have compassion for others unless we recognize that your suffering and my suffering are not different. Mm-hmm. That the causes and conditions that give rise to my suffering might be different, but the actual experience, not so different. When I feel fear and you feel fear, those are the same things. When I feel pain and you feel pain, of course, there's different manifestations, but our response to those things are very, very similar because we're all human beings. Mm-hmm. We want to be happy. We want to be comfortable. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to have loss. We don't want to be judged. And if I can recognize that we are really not that different, then I can make a connection with you. And how I do that is, I think a lot of times what makes us turn away from others' suffering is because it scares the crap out of us. We don't like it. We don't want to see it. I want to be able to fix it, but I can't develop a relationship with somebody who I think needs to be fixed. I can only develop a relationship with somebody that I can be with when they're suffering. And so I often professionally say, if I can't pull somebody out of the pit of suffering, then the least I could do is to climb down into the pit and sit with them in it. Mm. And that sometimes makes all the difference in the world, both to me, in terms of my sense of, am I actually doing something helpful? But also to the other person who feels like, well, here's somebody who actually acknowledges that I'm going through something terrible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. You ladies have brought words that I was resonating with as well too: therapeutic alliance, therapeutic relationship. And I'm not trying to use jargonous words, but the key thing is building relationship and connectedness. Tracy, I heard you mention that tapping into things like humor, tapping into things that just kept it real. We can all relate to that. And I know when we think of music, when we think of spiritual practices of, it could be contemplative prayer, it could be meditation, it could be mindfulness. We need to tap into very much different types of modalities, different treatments and care. So I'm just wondering, there was a really thoughtful question. Again, I'd like to pose to everyone. I'd love to start with you, Tracy, about how can we build trust? So from not, again, us and you, we're doing this together. How can we continue to build that trust, build that alliance in ways that might not come naturally at the beginning, but to press forward and persist?
I've had the opportunity, I've the good fortune to have had two amazing doctors. Mm. And there were three important things. Number one, they met me where I was. Mm. They allowed me to set priorities and they worked with me on them. And number two, they wanted to understand my journey. One doctor, it didn't matter why I was there, started every appointment by asking me how my dog was doing or how my child was doing.
Right.
They asked me whether or not I got that meeting that I was trying to get or something that was happening with Help Alberta. That made me feel like they were seeing the whole person. The second thing that really helped was that they were cheerleaders. Like sometimes I had to do it my own way. They were cheerleaders and supportive and made me feel safe that if something went wrong, we can always go back. So I was willing to try pretty much anything because if it didn't work, I could go back. And I I felt that security. And finally, they built it with me by understanding that there are times when we need a break. I'm sorry. Life is there, and it's hard, and pain is hard, and treatments are hard, and side effects suck. And the next appointment is just exhausting, or I'm too busy in that moment. And they understood and said, okay, well, let's give it a month. Let's give it 6 months. Let's give you a time to just be okay where you are. And then supported me through that time, allowing me that opportunity to breathe within the relationship was critical.
Tracy, I honor your thoughts, and I think that's going to reach many different people here. Thank you so much. Jaeun, if you could provide some comment regarding how can we build that trust and what's possibly worked well for you.
I think pretty much exactly what Tracy said. And I think from the care provider perspective, it's just that is really meeting people where they are. And, you know, in Zen Buddhism, we talk about, there's something that we call a beginner's mind. And what that really means is coming into every moment, which is very difficult, and each situation as if you're coming into that situation for the first time. So each patient I meet, I'm meeting them for the first time. But we bring with us all of these preconceived ideas about things and people and situations based on our knowledge, based on the things we know, based on our previous experience of other people. And it's recognizing that each person is a unique individual with their own experience and their own interpretation of their experience, their own responses to their experience, their own life circumstances, their own traumas, et cetera, et cetera. And so what worked for the person before isn't necessarily going to work for that person. And I need to be open to each person, and sometimes each person each time I see them, because whatever happened between the last time I saw them and this time could have changed how they're responding to things. So it's really just to meet people where they are and recognize that my preconceived ideas and my knowledge and my learning and all of that good stuff that does help us, but it also can set us up with a preconceived idea or an expectation of what somebody is going to be. And that can be a hindrance to developing trust. So it's really, and also I think another important thing is the willingness to say that you don't know. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine went to medical school, and she was talking about a class, she called it the How to Be a Doctor class. And she was talking about how they were told to never tell a patient that you don't know. They need to trust you. They need to believe that you know exactly what to say and you know the answer to everything. So, you know, always act as though you know. But I don't think that in these kind of complex situations, I don't think that serves people very well, to pretend that we know when we don't know. And so to be able to say, like, I'm not really sure what is going to be helpful for you in this place. I'm not really sure what to do right now, but I'm willing to come into this experience with you and try and see what we can find out.
Thanks for recognizing that we need to lean in and we just need to state that we don't always know the answers. That's real.
And as a patient myself, you know, I've appreciated it much more when somebody said that to me because it's sometimes really, really, insincerity is very easy to pick out. And I think we do our, you know, we don't do our patients enough, or give them enough credit for being able to pick that out. I mean, there's sincere empathy and then there's pretend empathy, and people know right away when you're not being sincere.
Well, and I'm going to segue just really quickly, not to take away from Sheila's answer to this, but Tracy, when you spoke about hearing someone asking if you're okay, and you just said, is this empathy or empathy? Am I dying? To me, that must have been both terrifying because you thought you were dying, but both relieving. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
You know, in that moment, I think your body does something to protect you in a crisis like that, because it was more surreal. I've been gifted the ability not to panic. And actually, one of the excuses that I got for the treatment that I had was that I didn't appear to be in that kind of distress, you know. But I think in that moment, what came out of my mouth was totally uncensored. it rang in my ears for months afterwards that empathy was the signal to tell me something has gone horribly wrong, would suggest that care and empathy didn't go hand in hand in the management of pain. And it broke my heart. I think that was far more traumatizing than the heart attack itself.
Thanks for sharing that. Sheila, again, I want to bring it back to my original question, if you'd like to comment on that. But again, I'd like to continue this conversation for a few more minutes at least. So please go ahead.
Sure. Well, from a musical perspective, when we lay a foundation of music that could be trusted, that would be music that would be predictable, stable, something that the person can trust to continue. And so I think in our social relationships as well, it's coming back. You know, if I say I'm going to be back tomorrow at 8 to check in on you, I'm back tomorrow at 8. So keeping your word, showing up, being honest about the limits of your knowledge. And then musically, we're also sort of looking at how can we be creative together. So when we're improvising with the patient, it's not me as the music therapist directing the music, right? It's how can we improvise this together? How you play, I play, we find a way to match and meet together. And from that, we can learn. And that is the sense of curiosity and the sense of working in more a collaborative way. And I think that's one of the powers of music is we're able to do this sometimes without just the words getting in the way. So there can be a sense of collaboration.
I think we've got some really close connections here because my next direction was going to be collaboration. So I couldn't have timed that better. And I think the key thing is that when I heard you speaking about intergenerational care and actually music therapy, that really spoke to me too. Just seeing my grandparents and seeing my aunts and uncles, musically inclined. I was wondering where I'm getting mine from, but again, this isn't about me. So what I'm wondering about the intergenerational care, the care providers, the families, and then using novel and creative ways to support people living with pain, to support ourselves too in our journeys. I'm just wondering if any one of you or all of you would like to comment on how that's been important to collaborate with each other. And we see the direction with entrainment when you talked about mimicking the physiological breathing. I see that being so core with mindfulness. And I see that we can link arms with so many different care providers, and then we can link arms with our family. So I'm just wondering, comments or how did that make a difference in your care, Tracy, and or from the perspective of people working with people with pain?
I think I'm on the other side of that generational thing at this moment. So I have a grandson who has EDS, and he has a spectrum disorder. And the tools that I use to not panic, to remain calm, to self-manage my pain, were tools that he needed, but he was too young for me to explain them the way that I learned them. So I think a great deal of it was just that human connection and displaying the action and being supportive of it being mimicked back at me that allowed that generational connection to flow through his care. I think it also helped force me to tighten mine up. And it's interesting, to this day, he will listen to music that I tend to listen to when I am attempting to manage or escape my pain. And it is a signal to me that he may need help.
That's wonderful. Would you like to add anything, Sheila?
That's fascinating to hear. And I think that really speaks to the strength of family bond and family connection, especially in modeling, as you were mentioning, healthy ways to cope. As a music therapist, I love working with families, and with the pandemic, that's a piece that's actually been a grief for me, as we have so many restrictions right now, right, in terms of how many families can be on the unit at one time. For kids being in hospital, it's quite scary. They're not sure how to relate to the person that they're visiting. So using music as a way, especially when we're all improvising and playing together, it can be a way for the child to connect, say, with grandma, and then create some music that is calming and gentle for grandma. And often they're videotaping it and sending it to other family members. And I think another side, when I work with pain management in terms of the guided imagery in music, I mentioned that I often work with families to teach them some of the techniques and skills so that they can use those music and imagery supports for their loved one, like when I'm not there, right? So that's another way to empower families and patients to work collaboratively together. Because honestly, those are the biggest supports, right? For a lot of our patients is their people. And so how can we empower those around them and the patients themselves to have some more tools to work together to support their pain?
Thanks. Jaeun, do you have anything to add? I know the word meaning making resonated with me, but I don't want to take away from what we were speaking about. So
Yeah, you know, there's, of course, we also try to include family in the circle of care, and sometimes it's caring for family members. It's sometimes helping people to understand and understand how each other are responding to a set of circumstances that everybody's feeling are outside of their control, and finding meaningful ways for people to connect when they can't connect otherwise. And sometimes it's also recognizing how family relationships sometimes have a traumatic relationship, and how that can really influence somebody's experience, and finding creative ways to understand that and work through it. You know, for example, I had a person I was working with who had a very extreme fear of death, and it turned out his fear of death was related to the idea that he was taught in his early religious life as a child that, you know, when you die, you're reunited with all your deceased relatives. Well, he was terrified because the people who had abused him and his family, he was afraid he was going to have to be reunited with them. And we were able to engage a process of creative expression of spirituality and creative expression of what an ideal afterlife for him would mean. And through that, he was able to heal a lot of that fear that he was experiencing, and consequently able to sort of tolerate his pain and his experience a lot better. So sometimes it's like kind of taking a step back and looking at what people's relationships are and what they mean, and then working with them in a collaborative way to find a meaningful way to kind of work through whatever it is they're experiencing. And sometimes that involves, you know, an interdisciplinary collaboration as well, in terms of looking at what other professionals do we need? Do I need to bring in a trauma therapist? Do I need to bring in somebody who can help to address certain aspects of somebody's experience that might be interfering with their ability to make meaning in the moment?
wonderful.
I'll probably go on and on about that for a long time, but I'll leave it there.
And I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like we're having a conversation right now. I know it's being streamed out, but this has been lovely. And we've had some questions that have come in, and we do apologize that we can't always get to all of them. However, thank you for taking the time to pose some questions. And I would really like to powerfully, and not to put any pressure on you, Tracy, but just I'd like to end with you. If there are any parting messages, whether it be something that resonated for you for this presentation, or that you just thought about and you're reflecting right now, that you just would like to end with.
You know, I'm thinking back through the entire conference to this point. One of the things that I've heard a lot from doctors is that it does them no good to hear patients complain about their past treatment. It does no good to hear them complain about what the last doctor did. And I understand, we're in a hurry, we're on a time limit. The thing is, chronic pain is here today, it will be here tomorrow. I think what we've forgotten is that sometimes that experience before winding up in your office is going to profoundly impact the way I'm going to engage with you. And depending on the level of trauma or the coping ability of the trauma of that patient, we've seen patients sabotage relationship after relationship because they have reached a point where they are so defensive, they cannot let down their guard, and no doctor has a hope of helping unless they understand it. Like I said, they learned an awful lot about me in 15 minutes. It doesn't take long, but I think it's got to become an integral part of pain management.
That simply was what real medicine and pain medicine and medicine for all and supports for all truly is. If we can seek to understand, listen, and thank you so much, each one of you ladies, for being a part of this Building Resilience session. We look forward to you continuing to join us for the rest of the conference. And this was really powerful for me as well. So thank you for that. I just would like to pass the virtual baton to Dr. Rob Tanguay. We have some celebratory awards to promote and just to talk about. And I'm just gonna say, Rob, take it away.